Hey, and welcome to 20 Minutes Self Development with me, your host, Tam Dillon. This podcast is all about focused, effective self development, specifically for healing practitioners, space holders, and intuitives who want to do the work behind the work. In each episode, I'll introduce you to a key concept, reflection, or tool that's designed to strengthen your inner capacity and support the integrity of your practice. In just 20 minutes, we'll go beyond surface level growth and into the real work that makes you a stronger, steadier, and more embodied practitioner. Let's get into today's episode. Well, hello, and welcome to this week's episode of 20 Minutes of Development. So, today I'm going to be chatting about language, and specifically the language to describe what it is that we do, the skills that we need as practitioners, and the things that can happen in sessions as a practitioner. So when we don't have the language to explain the skills that we need as a practitioner or the things that could be happening in our sessions, we end up working in the dark. And while we may naturally be cultivating certain skills without realizing what they are or that they're even a skill in the first place, or perhaps we're seeing patterns in client sessions, but we don't have the words to name those patterns. Without this vocabulary, without these words, you can't easily refine what you're doing. You can't really research what it is that you need to do or what it is that's happening, and you can't really address these things with intention. So this episode comes very much from my personal experience, and it's a big reason why I wrote the my new ebook, Essential Terminology, a reference book for healing practitioners. It is a free resource that is made up of three main sections: core competencies that we need as practitioners, things that can happen in sessions, and the common industry terms that we like to throw around, but we don't often fully understand. So when I started out 25 odd years ago, I was just a tarot reader. I didn't think in terms of things like congruence or active listening or unconditional positive regard or attachment or transference. I knew that I needed to be empathetic, but I didn't know the term unconditional positive regard, which is complete non-judgment for the person in front of you, or the depth to which these skills or occurrences could really go. I knew I needed to show up for my clients. I mean, obviously, I'm doing holistic work. I'm being a healer and a helper. Like, of course, I'm gonna show up for my clients and have empathy and have care and have to have these things. But I didn't know specific terms like congruence or active listening, unconditional positive regard. I didn't know how important these terms were and how important they were to how it was that I was showing up in my sessions with my clients. In those early days, if I was having a bad day or I'd put a card on the table and I'd be like, oh my God, I don't remember what that card means. I'd put up a mask. I'd pretend everything was fine. I'd act like I knew what was going on, and I'd try and meet the image that my clients had of me. I would try and maintain that image that my clients had of me, and in a lot of ways, I was playing into the pedestal that they were putting me on. Not super healthy, right? Yeah, because Tam didn't know any better. It wasn't really until I did my counseling certification and my modern applied psychology certification that the lecturer in both courses introduced me to Carl Rogers' theories, which is Carl Rogers' therapy is based on the principle that three core competencies are needed in order for true healing and transformation to take place, and that is congruence, unconditional positive regard, and empathy. Um, and as much as I'd heard congruence before, and obviously, I mean, empathy floats around the industry all the time, but I didn't realize that I'd been cultivating these skills all along, but without the words for them, I couldn't develop them as intentionally as I could have, or what it was that I was trying to develop in the first place. If I'd learned the term congruence earlier on, I would have gone straight to researching it, learning from Carl Rogers' work, and refining that skill much faster, meaning that I would have shown up in my earlier sessions with pure authenticity. So if I was having a bad day, or I did put a card down on the table and be like, oh my God, what does the card mean? I wouldn't have masked, I wouldn't have pretended like everything was okay, I wouldn't have had misalignment within myself, which is what incongruence is misalignment between your inner landscape and how you're presenting yourself to the external world. So as I was presenting to the external world, I've got my shit together, I know my cards, I know what's going on, I've got all my, the way that you view me, I'm meeting that image just fine. But on the inside, no, like the opposite, man. The opposite was happening. That's incongruence, and I didn't know that. I misunderstood, because that was the impression that was given to me within our industry, that I have to have my shit together. I can't go into a session and be having a bad day, or not know my cards. I couldn't go into a session and be imperfect. I didn't know that it was okay to not be perfect in sessions. I didn't know that it was okay for me to still be a human being in my sessions. And that same gap existed when it came to the dynamics that happened in my session. So, for example, I didn't know that attachment was a thing that could develop between a client and a practitioner. I had clients who would tell me, oh my God, you make me feel so much better, or you make me feel so seen, or you really just give me the best guidance, and you know what's best for me. Hell, I even had clients ask me to be my friend at the end of sessions. And a lot of these clients, they would cling to me for all the answers and all the guidance. And, they wanted to make any kind of shift in life. They would pick up the phone and be like, Tam, pull a card. And I knew something wasn't quite right about this, but I didn't understand what was happening on the psychological level. And why would I? I was a tarot reader. I wasn't a therapist. I read a couple of psychology books out of personal interest, because human nature fascinated me, people fascinated me, and because I was reading people and their natures, I knew that I needed to understand human nature better. I needed to understand my clients better. I needed to understand their experiences better. So that's where my interest in psychology stemmed from. But I never thought about psychology within a session. So as much as I'm thinking about my clients and their psychology and their nature, I'm not thinking about the psychology and the nature of the session that I'm having with them. When I finally learned terms like attachment and transference and pedestaling and countertransference and codependence, the light bulbs, well, how they all just switched on. Codependence admittedly was one term I already knew well because of my personal experience with my brother, who was an addict. And growing up around addiction, codependence is something you learn about pretty early on. And I'd already done a lot of work on my own codependence and my patterns, which meant that I could recognize and avoid it in sessions. Because if I didn't check myself there, I would have just bled codependently into my sessions. But for the rest of these things that were going on in my sessions, I'd be navigating them without a map. I didn't even know that I was navigating them. I was like, am I doing something wrong? Do I need better boundaries? What in the session here is incorrect that these things are coming up? Once I had the language, I could see where I'd been intuitively managing these dynamics, but now I could actually approach them intentionally. I could set clearer boundaries. I could set healthier boundaries. I could keep my sessions healthier and safer. And I could recognize that these patterns are completely normal. They're completely normal in practitioner work, because as much as we're not therapists and counselors, we're not licensed or qualified in these fields, but we're no different in the terms of the relationship that our clients will form with us, the bonds that they will try and form with us, the dynamics that are going to come up in sessions, because we're still working with people in a therapeutic setting. So what this really helped me with was knowing that I didn't have to take things personally. I wasn't doing anything explicitly incorrectly. I just didn't have language to explain what was happening, and what was happening a lot of the times was normal. The third part of my book, so the first two parts I've chatted about, the core competencies that we need as practitioners, and things that can arise in session. And then the third part of the book is common industry terms. So things like divine feminine and awakening, channeling, safe space, healer, medicine person, all the good buzzwords in our industry. The words that get thrown around in practitioner spaces all the time. And very often without much thought to what they really mean. Sometimes these words come from our training in the modalities that we do. Some of them we see repeated on social media posts. A new buzzword will come out and we're like, oh, let's use that word. Sometimes they're part of the cultural, spiritual tradition that we've learned from. But here's the thing. Our clients haven't done the same training that we've done. They haven't qualified in the modalities or done the cultural or spiritual traditional training that we've done. They haven't come from our industry. They could be bankers and lawyers. They don't know the words that we use, just like we don't know the words that they use. They don't automatically understand our terminology. And if we can't clearly explain the words that we use, we're going to risk alienating or worse, confusing our clients, which breaks down the foundation, and it erodes away the trust that we build with our clients. And it's not just about defining a word. It's about refining communication so we can actually speak to clients from all different walks of life, backgrounds, belief systems. The diversity that walked through my doors over the years is huge. Admittedly, I grew up in the country of South Africa, so obviously I grew up around diverse cultures and backgrounds. I had people coming to see me where English wasn't their first language, so I had to learn to not just expand my English vocabulary for the sake of simplifying all these hectic spiritual mystical terms so that it didn't sound all woo-woo and crazy, but also because English wasn't the first language for a lot of the people that I read for. So I had to find ways to explain what was coming through, messages I was given, guidance that was coming through in a way that they could understand. So I had to expand my vocabulary. Moving to Southeast Asia again, I'm now immersed in even broader cultures, the culture that I was living in, Vietnamese culture. Read for many Vietnamese people, again, English not their first language. Their cultural background is entirely different to mine. Their traditions are entirely different to mine. Again, I had to expand my vocabulary. I'm now reading for a very large expat community from, golly, name the country. You'll probably find an expat from there. So the diversity that will walk through your door as a practitioner is going to be there. Belief systems, religious belief systems, cultural backgrounds, all of these things need to be taken into consideration, because that's part of being a competent, confident practitioner, being able to explain what we do in a way that's accessible to whoever is sitting in front of us. When you don't have the vocabulary for your skills, you can't really develop them, never mind with precision. You can't go and research them. You can't learn from other practitioners or refine them with intention. You may still grow these skills intuitively, much like I did, and much like I've seen many other practitioners do, but it's going to take longer. It's going to be a lot more frustrating. It's going to cause a lot more unnecessary burnout and exhaustion. And you may not reach the same depth that you could if you do have the words and you're like, oh, okay, well, let's go and refine my active listening skill. When you don't have the vocabulary for what's happening in your sessions, you risk misreading normal patterns as personal failings or missing them entirely until they cause a big problem. Without that awareness, you can't put boundaries in place or keep the session dynamic clean and safe. And when you don't have the vocabulary to explain industry terms, you risk clients misinterpreting what you do, or worse, dismissing your work entirely because they think it's something that it's not, or because you just sound like you're talking a whole lot of mystical woo-woo, and they're like, well, this just sounds like a crock of nonsense. So, I'm out this bitch. So we really need to have some vocabulary here. We need to refine communication skills. We need to expand on that wording so that we can be more accessible to our clients. So we're not alienating our clients and we're not coming off as ridiculous, mystical, woo-woo nonsense, because a lot of what we do, in fact, all of what we do is so far from being woo-woo nonsense. All right. So do your work a service here. So I wrote Essential Terminology, a reference book for healing practitioners, because I saw how much of my own work changed once I had the language. And it's not about making your work more complicated. I'm not trying to give you more homework. I know if you've worked with me, you're going to be like, Tam, you love to give homework. And yes, I do, because you've got to do your own work, man. But I made this book because I know how helpful it would have been for me as a baby tarot reader to understand things that were happening in my sessions, to understand the psychology of my sessions, to understand the skills and the core competencies that I needed to be a confident and competent and safe reader. As much as I was like, oh, I'm just a tarot reader, I'm still a practitioner, I'm still a space holder, I'm still offering a therapeutic-based service. So I need to have some skills, man, other than just, being nice or, what I thought empathy meant back in the day. So this is why I've put this book together, and it's why it's a freely available resource. Because it's something that I would love every practitioner to have in their toolbox. And like I said, it's not about making your work more complicated. I'm not trying to add to the amount of work and things that you need to know. It's about giving you the clarity and the wording and the confidence to understand what you're already doing, refine it more deeply, and explain it more clearly. The book covers core competencies, your session dynamics, and common industry terms. It's there to help you become more competent, more confident, and more equipped to handle the wide range of people and situations that you're going to meet in your practice. If you're a practitioner who's ever thought, I don't know what I'm doing, if you're a practitioner who's ever thought, I know what I'm doing, but I don't always know how to explain it, this book is for you. And you can find the book very easily if you visit academy.tamdillon.com. As you open on the homepage, there's a link to request the book. The link for to request the book is in the description of this episode as well. So like there's no excuses, man. Like you can get your hands on this book. And I do highly recommend getting your hands on this book because it's going to be a really great tool in your toolbox. And before your next session, I encourage you to notice the words that you're using, both with yourself and with your clients and with other practitioners. The words that you're using to explain the work that you're doing and explain what's happening in your sessions. The right language can truly transform your work. So pay attention to it and really understand it, understand what you're saying, and understand what it is that you're trying to say, and find the words to say it in a way that's going to be accessible to the person sitting in front of you. So do go grab yourself a copy of this book. A lot of care and personal experience has gone into it. I know that these are all terms I wish I'd known back in the day. And I know that it's going to be a really great, helpful resource for you as well as a practitioner. So I'll say it again, the right language can completely transform your work.
Thanks for joining me for this week's episode of 20-Minute Self-Development. If today's reflections were helpful, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss next week's episode, where we'll explore another tool or principle to support you in doing your own work as a healing practitioner. If you're looking for deeper support, my practitioner mentoring sessions are designed to help you refine your presence, integrate your self-work, and build a practice that's both ethical and sustainable. You can also visit the Tam Dillon Academy to explore all current programs and resources built specifically for space holders like you. Until next time, keep showing up for your own work, and remember, real growth is built on consistency, integrity, and self-responsibility.